And welcome to episode 2 of 360 Decentral, which will actually be the second part in the Zonified interview series with Selena and Paul Worrell. And this one is a little bit more Paul-centric, but I find it to be quite compelling in terms of getting to know not only Paul as a person, but also the sheer experience and wealth of knowledge that he does bring to the Zonified project. Just within the first 20 minutes of this conversation, we'll hear a little bit about Paul's musical inclinations, as well as working in Baghdad, assisting the rebuild of Kuwait, and even a story or two that happened to implicate Jamie Dimon. And that's all within the first 20 minutes, I might add. So there's considerably more content here to be had. But without further ado, I give you part 2 with Selena and Paul Worrell of Zonified. Because this is the types of conversations that I think you guys need to be putting out there. I really do. It's way more humanizing. So I've hit record. I want to hear about this phenomenon of musicians in the blockchain space, right? I'm a drummer, you're a guitarist. Selena, what's your skill?
But it would have been piano had I not been doing Zonified.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, there are apps now that you can set it up on your phone and it will guide you through keyboard lessons, right?
But no, I didn't know that one. So
But I just taught her the 1-4-5, just the 1-4-5 intervals, and said all you got to do is hold your fingers like that, and go da. That's it. That's all they do, right? And they don't get all like this.
And the 1-4-5 from Paul is because he is a pure blues fanatic.
Well, that's just the progression that's for blues most of the time, the 1-4-5 interval.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to mention one other point. So the day I worked with Ethereum and decided to move to it, the day I composed a song and put it on SoundCloud and called it Ethereum. And it's a really slow improvised blues with my badly recorded with one of those Zoom handset things. My brother just taught to play bass. He's playing bass, and I just solo over the whole thing. I'll send you the link to that. And so I call that the sound of Ethereum.
Can you please send that through? I'd be really interested to hear the vibe and get a sense maybe through your music of what you were feeling at the time. That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's like really, you'll see the bass is not balanced very well, so the speakers vibrate, but you'll see exactly, it's kind of a bit mellow.
Yeah. And I think, seeing we're back on this topic about us as people then, Andy, so I think it would be interesting for the viewers to know why it is that we feel so confident in this product, because we have done it before, in particular yourself as a software entrepreneur. So if you could, like when you started with the Gulf War.
Well, okay. Yeah. So the first thing I would say, when I first went down to London, I was a student at Jaguar Cars. So I did that for 4 or 5 years. And then when I graduated, I went to London, obviously to get into banking and stuff. And in the first couple of months when I was there was a friend that you all share flats, don't you? And there was a guy who was an auditor for Ernst & Young. And he said to me, Paul, we've got this virus apparently in our company. It's taken down all of the PCs. And he said, can you help? So I wrote this little program that fixed this virus. And he went in and he came back and said, it's fixed it. It's brilliant. They're amazed. They want to know if you're interested in starting a business fixing viruses. This is 1988 or something. And I went, no, that's stupid, because you only get viruses on Microsoft. And that's because it's the nature of the way Bill Gates has taken the operating system. It's not really a proper computing operating system, but everybody will shift to the stuff we use now, and viruses won't be a problem. So I don't really think there's an opportunity in providing software to fix viruses.
Famous last words.
See?
We could have been dealing with the real John McPhee over here, but decisions are decisions, I suppose.
And then, and after that, you went to work with the team, Red Adair's team.
Yeah, so after that, I worked for this American company called Bechtel out of San Francisco, and I wrote some software. At the time, TCP/IP, which is what the internet is based on, most people didn't agree that it would ever take off. They just said it was a waste of time. And so I was sitting there as the odd person that said, no, I'm going to use TCP/IP to set up these networks of computers. And they said, no, it's no good because we need a mainframe because everybody works on the same mainframe so they can share the data. But the mainframe was overloaded and very slow. So they had about 1,000 PCs that people used for doing their work, but they were upset because they weren't integrated. So I wired them all together, and I wrote this TCP/IP software that would then broadcast their work to each other in a peer-to-peer fashion and update what they were working on. And within 6 months, they turned the mainframe off.
Oh,
and again, I got upset with them because I felt quite good that I'd written that software and I wanted to tell the world. But instead of letting me in England be the person that would go and tell everybody about this software, they had some people in San Francisco do it who said it was theirs. So I resigned and left. And about 10 years after that, I remember meeting someone and said, do you know, they still use the same software and it's not changed since you finished it. And it still comes up with Paul Worrell on it when it starts. So I realized, I'm struggling to commercialize what I'm doing here. And I'd fallen out with that company quite badly. And they spoke to me saying, would you come back? And I said, no, I'd only come back if I get to travel the world. So they said, oh, okay, well, we've got this job in Iraq, Baghdad, no?
Yeah, Baghdad.
In Baghdad. And I said, oh, I'll take that job. Anyway, a couple of months later, Iraq invades Kuwait. And the colleagues that I would have been working with become part of, the prisoners in Baghdad, the hostages in Baghdad.
Oh,
and I was so angry that I was not given the opportunity to be involved in such an exciting thing. Angry about it. So I was really angry with them, and they said, so they contacted me and they said, Paul, look, it looks like we're going to get an opportunity in the rebuilding of Kuwait after this war. Would you be interested in being involved with us again? So they asked me to turn up at a pub in Hammersmith that had a basement. And if you remember the famous American series called X something, not X Factor, but X-Files. And do you remember in the X-Files, there was a guy that smoked who would always be in a dark corner and you just see his cigarette smoke, yeah? So I was asked to go to this pub. So I sat in the basement of this pub and they said, someone will contact you. And then I saw this guy that was like, just sort of like that, but a younger version. And he came over and said, are you Paul Worrell? And I said, yeah. And he spoke to me for 10 minutes. And then he said, yeah, you can go. He said, when can you be ready? And I said, well, I have to resign from my job first. This is to go to Kuwait.
Yeah.
I said, I have to resign from my job first. And he goes, don't worry about it. And then when I went back to where I worked, the director that I worked for asked me, and he said, I understand you're going to Kuwait.
Jesus.
So this company had obviously spoken to the company I worked for and said, we need him to go to this war thing. So I was released from that job without having to resign. And I ended up in the war had ended in the February, but there were 650 wellhead fires, wellheads that had been blown up, and there was so much smoke that if you look at satellite pictures, it was a black stripe all the way around the world. Literally a black stripe all the way around the world. It was raining oil in Argentina. Okay, and I went straight in a couple of weeks after the main attack happened in the north of Kuwait. I went straight in there as part of the project to put those fires out. And I was responsible for technology. I was about 23, 24. And I was there a year, and there was no law, no police, no safe buildings. We had no vehicles. We had nothing. So I was fortunate, and in a way, it's been a problem for my career because I went into a place where there was unlimited budget. So I had all the software I wanted. So I didn't just buy Oracle, the database, for one computer type. I bought it for every platform they did and had it running on every single platform. So that kind of experience in a real world environment under a lot of pressure is fantastic. And I've taken that experience with me for every job I've done. But it does mean that I approach things from the perspective that anything is possible.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go into a country the size of Wales and there's no government, no police, how do you behave? How do you organize yourself? How do you become civil?
You crack
right?
on.
Yeah, and how do you achieve what you've got to achieve? So you become very resourceful, you know, and you think I think you think differently about the world. And then I ended up in Geneva, where I started my first company. And I remember sitting in meetings where people were talking about DARPANET, which is kind of the internet, whether it would ever allow commercial traffic. And I sat in there and they're going, well, we can't allow commercial traffic because it's insecure. And who's going to control it? There's no company involved in it. Surely something that's just going to be all these things connecting together is not going to work. So the same thing we have with the blockchain now.
That's my point.
Right? The same thing we have with the blockchain now is exactly the same back then. So it was Reuters that I was working with at the time. They were my client. And I was in these meetings with now Thomson Reuters in Geneva. And, you know, I never thought anything of it. I was young, so just like the young people involved now, they won't think anything of it. It's just normal. But to be, I was the same then, and the establishment said it will never be allowed, and then it took off. And I was selling web servers in 1993. Okay, 1993, all on my own in Geneva, going around in there's 3 languages in Switzerland. Obviously Italian, well 4, the Swiss, which nobody uses, Italian. German and French. So they all spoke English as a business, so that made my life easy. And I was going around selling these web servers and nobody knew what it was for, right? Why would I ever want to convert what I'm doing to HTML, you know? And so I ended up with no money, living in Geneva in a flat someone lent me with my dog at the time that I had, and a mattress, and cockroaches. Cockroaches would just like crawl across the floor in the morning. If I hadn't cleaned up my dog's bowl, the cockroaches would come out. So I'd have to make sure I always clean my dog's bowl, right? Otherwise, I wake up and that would be going, and these cockroaches would be going across the floor. So anyway, I met a guy there that was the financial director of a company called Tandy Grid, which was quite famous at the time. And in Switzerland, you're not allowed to give up a lease on a commercial property. You have to see it all the way through.
Oh, wow.
He closed down, in 1994, he closed down Tandy Grid because it was not profitable. But he was stuck with this marbled floor, beautiful office next to the airport in the Movenpick hotel building. So they gave it to me. So I ended up pretending my company was doing well in this office. And there's so many stories I feel like I'm going on, but
no, it's great.
What happened was, so this was 1993, 94, and there was lots of offices. So to make some money, I rented them out. Okay,
Smart.
I wasn't supposed to, but I rented them out, and we got quite a few Russian groups in there. So they got to know me, and they, as I say, I'm quite young, so they pull me into this office, and they say, "Are you okay?"
No, I just had a thought. That was this still 1993, 1994?
Yes, yeah.
So that was around about the same time that Russia was first going through its privatizations, wasn't it?
Exactly. So this is where I'm going.
Yeah.
So I end up in offices full of Russians who are doing that, and they called me in and said, "Paul, you made us coffee. And you're a real nice guy. We're going to." I'm very bad at accents. I've got my son here who's brilliant accent.
You make wonderful coffee. We're going to, yes.
yeah. So he says, we've got this oil. He starts talking about this oil field or something or other in Russia. We've got this oil field. You can be involved. We make you very rich. You know, you come to Moscow next week. So I went to this other guy that I knew who was doing work in Russia, and he said, "Yeah, it's all taken off, Paul. If you really," he says, "You've got to be prepared for it, but as you've done Kuwait and you're used to that kind of environment, I think you would do quite well." And I went, "No, I don't like the sound of this." So I ended up, I turned down all of that. So I literally could have been involved in that. I turned down that, and I was sitting there one day and the phone goes, and it was a guy who's now the CTO of wholesale banking for Nomura International, Matthew Hampson. And he was a junior on the equity trading floor, and someone tipped him off that there was this guy in Geneva that was an expert on Unix, you know, and Sun Microsystems at the time, and he just said, "Would you be interested in a job in a bank?" And I said, okay, so can you fly over now? So I got someone to look after my dog. I flew over there. He walked me in. Well, actually, he didn't. It was somebody else. But he walked me into the dinner room for Namura, and he just said, "All yours, mate," and walked off. And I just stood there. Okay. So I said, okay. So I looked round, and it was a very loud environment with a lot of shouting people. And I saw this guy that was swearing the most. So I went up to him and I said, "Hi, my name's Paul. I'm a technology specialist. What can I do to help?" And he says, "That printer don't work." So I went and fixed this printer, and then I fixed something else, and then within 5 months I was building a team in Nomura and running the technology deployment for Nomura International across their data infrastructure. So there was no management. They just put me on the floor, and the guy ran off. He just ran off and left me there. It wasn't Matthew. Matthew was on the other floor, trying to deal with that floor. So that was, that's just where I got to then. And then in the dot-com period, I went to the States. I was working for Merrill Lynch. I was in a pub, and I was really annoyed with Merrill Lynch because I wanted to automate their technology delivery process. It was too manual, and they just wasn't having anything off it. So I was moaning about it in a pub on Bishopsgate outside Liverpool Street Station, and beautiful pub with a wonderful ornate ceiling, fantastic place.
You were the director of the time.
Yeah, I was a European director for Distributed Systems.
Wow.
But I was really annoyed with things, and this guy tapped me on the shoulder. He said, "Well, why don't you package up a business plan around that?" He said, "Because with all the equity trading online, all the brokers are going out of business and they're scared to death. So you can see a similarity again now." He said they're going to have to come up the value chain, and I understand your experience with private banking, which I've been doing in my clients were private banking in Geneva. He said, so they've got to come up the value chain. How about taking what you want to do, and then, because these brokers don't have very good technology, and then you provide a cloud. It wasn't called cloud services then, it was a software as a service. He said, provide that as a software as a service with all the real-time data from Bloomberg and Reuters, so that they can have these proper trading sort of systems to do portfolio management, and help them move up the value chain. So I resigned from Merrill Lynch, put a business plan together, and I went to the States, and it was just like today's X Factor. I'd never experienced that before, but when we got there was a limousine to pick me up. Then I ended up in like a room with a queue of people waiting to do a pitch. And the broker that was organising it for me, he said, "Look, you have 30 seconds to do your pitch." He says, "There's two things I've got to tell you." He says, "One, you're English. You're way too conservative. You've got to go up 1,000%. Hey, it's going to be a meeting of billions of dollars." He said, "Stop talking millions and talk billions of dollars." And he said, "That's how America is. You've got to be much louder, much more overt, much more ambitious." And he said, "The second thing is you're lucky because I think they'd kick you out in another 30 seconds. But because you have a nice English accent, they'll carry on listening to you for longer." So I went and did that pitch, and on the day they gave us $250,000, just boom, like that.
And what year was that?
That was in 1999.
And then you went back for the 65.
So then, and the guy said that is not to put in your business and pay people. They call that platform money. So that's just to do the marketing around doing a better rate, which is where we are now, right? This is what's happening now. So he said it's just the money to do the raise, and he gets his first exit just from that part, right? So I was going to and from the States, doing these pitches and everything, and then the end of it was being in Global Crossing, sitting there in front of this guy.
Was it Walsh?
Walsh was the guy's name.
Yeah.
And as I arrived there, I went into the lobby, and there was all these people walking with me. And I looked round, and I said, "Who are these people?" And they said, "They're coming in there with you." And I didn't even know who they were. And so we go in 2 lifts to get everybody up, walk into this room with this guy, Walsh, who sits there. And I never forget him because he was dressed in very tight, all black, with a bolo tie, and black slicked-backed hair, all greased, just like with winkle picker shoes on. And he was a top guy. And front page of Forbes and everything, that guy. And I sat there with a guy called Alpesh Patel, who's a sort of well-known media person at the time, and a couple of other people, and all these other people that I didn't know who they were. And he said, "Okay, I introduced myself, and then he said, just stop there. He said, could you introduce all your friends here? Because he didn't know who they were either. Of course, I didn't know. So I said, well, far be it for me, typical Englishman, right? I can fall into that trap easily. I said, far be it for me to introduce my friends here. I'll let them do it themselves.
Smart
and
man.
They went round, and it was like the ex so and so of Chase Manhattan. It was all of these really quite important people. Since then, recently, there's been an implication that Jamie Dimon himself was in the room, but that's a bit of a rumor, okay? And I wouldn't know who he was then either. But they went around and introduced themselves, and then I did my pitch, and that's when he told me that they only do $65 million placements, and I was asking for too much.
No, too little.
Sorry, too little. And so he then said, let's go out and have a chat in the room round the corner. And he said, look, I'm going to give the go-ahead for this investment. He said, you obviously know what you're doing.
So that's the 65 million.
But he said, but be a bit careful about the people in the room.
Huh.
So this is where I realized you can get all this fever, and suddenly you're getting involved with people that maybe you're not that familiar with dealing with, certain types of people that you're not familiar with dealing with. So that's what happens in this whole space, you know. So anyway, as it happened, my lawyers at the time were Simmons and Simmons, and another big London law firm. They did all the term sheet and everything, but there was a bit of a coup.
No, but if you actually, you're missing the point here. What did you do with the $65 million?
I turned it down. Right? I turned it down, but they said it's so good. Okay, we'll do half, right? So I said, okay, I'll take that. And the Simmons did the term sheet, and but because I changed the amount, it all had to be renegotiated term sheet wise.
Yes.
Which took longer, and then the crash happened.
Oh no.
So the .com crashed. We didn't get the funds at all, and then strange enough, Global Crossing themselves went into Chapter 11.
But Global Crossing at the time, if you say how big, because
they were number one on the Nasdaq. Number one on the Nasdaq.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. If you look at Global Crossing, the history, they were the top. They were the biggest thing for the 90s. Massive. Number one on the Nasdaq. The Walsh guy and stuff was at the top. You know, I'm forgetting the names of the people. When I go and look at the wiki page on it, I go, oh yeah, that was the guy I was presenting to. So it's kind of like a whole, you can see from the late 80s with the Ernst & Young thing, then the Kuwait, then the Geneva, the web servers, that the company I sold in '94 for just enough to cover my losses, basically. So all my money I earned in Geneva was gone. So then I go into dealing with frauds, Merrill Lynch, Nomura, etc. All the motorcycle stuff is going on at the same time. Then I go to do this raising the .com era. That doesn't happen. So, but I was still determined to keep going. So I actually came up with a product that was a SMS message-based product for sports events. So it allowed sports events to immediately create an SMS channel for the audience, and then use it to subscribe to results and various stuff like that, right? And that product, and if you think about it now, that product would be dead because of course we've got smartphones and internet,
exactly,
and 4GS and everything. But you didn't then, and the story there is that I managed to get a relationship with the British Rally Championship. And I spent a lot of money launching the first event in Bournemouth back in 2005, I think.
Right.
And we had the press there, we had girls there, we had, you know, Ferraris to put people in. And then as we were going live, the technical feed to the results system, they wouldn't let me have access to it. So I had anticipated a failure of that. So I designed a system for really quick data entry to shift the girls that were helping promote the product to data entry. And so they were looking at the screens and just doing data entry really fast.
Clever.
And rally results are very complicated, okay? So I had to design a system to make that really swift and efficient. But what happened, I went to the toilet, I came back, computers on the floor, everyone's crying, and we were affecting the betting, and some people came in and shut us down.
But the mafia got involved there.
Yeah,
really?
I mean,
Yeah, well,
I mean that there was something that happened where they shut me down, so I lost so much money I couldn't continue with that. So that's kind of like this experience getting businesses going. It's not just get a business, get a customer. There's all kinds of impacts that you have on existing established businesses and processes. And this, what you have to do is recognize they exist and give something for them. And that's what we've tried to do with this, looking at the ecosystem, looking at all the people that might be affected and making sure they've all got some benefit to move in the same direction.
So after that, you left, you went back to the banks because you could see the crash coming.
Yeah, so I went back to JP Morgan Chase. Now, okay, I'm sorry, there's just so much. So the other thing, you know Dragon's Den? Do you know Dragon's Den?
Yes.
Okay. So I got a phone call in 2005 or 6 to say, Paul, there's this guy who's creating this TV program where entrepreneurs pitch to them and then somebody wins, game show type, and they invest. And they're designing the program, and do you want to go up and be part of designing the program? So I said, okay, then fine. Now, a product that I've been working on for a long time, my most ambitious project, was an invoice financing platform that was Sharia law compliant. And so I've been working on that a long time, very mature concept in my head. I'd already pitched it to Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan Chase and hadn't really got anywhere. They didn't see a need for it at the time. This was pre-2008.
They did afterwards.
Yeah, and so there's a place in Birmingham called Pebble Mill, which is not used by the BBC now. So I went up to there, and then I was taken in this room. Again, I don't know anybody or anything. That's normally what happens. Walked in, all the cameras are there. It's not a live set or anything. It's just, they're just designing the program. The cameras are there. The director's there, sitting in front of me, and they said, "Okay, give us your pitch." So I did my pitch, and I got to the end, and I said, "And so I'm looking for £2 million, and that money will be used to get the license from the Financial Services Authority to operate a new derivative financial instrument. But once I pay for it, I should have a monopoly for about 5 years on that until they feel comfortable to then allow anybody to have a similar financial instrument, because I'd securitized these on this. It was a securitization platform. So so I did the pitch, and when I said the 2 million, he looked up at me and he said, "But this is for like £25,000." And I just said, "What idiot would stand in front of you guys to give 50% of their business away for 25 grand? Most people could steal it off their granny. But you idiot!" I was so upset and so angry with them that they had to be involved and prepare, go and do this pitch. And I'm sure that's on tape. If that's digitally saved, that'll be at tape with the BBC, me doing that pitch and me getting really annoyed. And the director was quite a young guy, and he was visibly shocked at how angry I got, you know. And I left. I always feel bad when I have an outburst, right? I always feel guilty and think that's on. But in reality, they did solicit that. And I never watch Dragon's Den now, ever. I never watch it because I don't want to see people say, "Oh, I'm going to make, 7-sided dice, blah, blah, blah." And then they give them 10 grand or something, right? Business is not like that. A lot more money is required normally, etc. So anyway, I ended up at JP Morgan Chase in 2007. And then 6 months after I was working there, I lost access to all my computers. So I had to go to my boss and say, "Oh, I think I've been fired," because that's the first thing that happens, right? "I think I've been fired." Sorry, that's a subtly different story. But so I said, "I think I've been fired." And they found out it was just a glitch, just a mistake. But I thought I was fired. But the next week, I got an email from Jamie Dimon.
He called the partner.
Oh, sorry, he called,
Jamie
but didn't
Dimon.
get me, and he left a message on the voicemail saying, "I'm very interested in this invoice financing thing for the Sharia compliant," called Trillic it was. "I want you to present it to me and the senior management team on Monday at 3 o'clock. So I then go back to my boss and say, "Oh, look, Jamie Dimon wants me to present this." I got fired on the spot. Seriously. And I ended up with compliance, and compliance said, "You are not allowed to, your job is not involving that, you are a technologist." I said, "Yeah, but Jamie Dimon has asked me to pitch this." "Yeah, but you're just a technologist, you shouldn't be soliciting." I said, "I didn't solicit him. This is from a year before, and now his emails is just called and left the message.
Suddenly you're a threat to middle management.
Yeah. So what happened was compliant HR got involved. Were very supportive because they said they're in the business of making sure there's opportunity for people. But compliance said I'd broken Chinese wall rules or something, so I had to be fired. So they came up with an agreement that I could do the pitch to the senior management team, but not with Jamie. And so I did that pitch. And I suppose the issue was that my team was in other banks. So I had to pull in these people covertly from the other banks to come in and do the pitch. And they said it was great. They said it was great, fantastic. It's such a good idea. It's the right time because of 2008 and all the petrodollars, that's where the money was. But the problem is you're going to have to leave. And then we'll talk to you as an independent and, we'll see what we can do. And we'd like you to run your whole business on JP Morgan Chase Rails, they call it, their infrastructure.
Yeah.
And I had to come home and make a decision. I took the job because I was already, in difficult circumstances. Do I jump out of a good job and maybe they'll do something with me? Or do I stay in the job? So I opted to stay in the job because of the crisis. Yeah. And I had to sign some special documents that meant that my IP and their IP, and I would never be involved in IP and all that kind of stuff. So I had a top secret document through my whole JP Morgan Chase career until the end, when in the end I said, look, I've got to go because I need to do another project. Yeah. There's just not enough innovation in the firm. So, and that's where we are now, which I left to do this.
It's all that experience coming into this product and the recognition that 20 years ago when they said the internet, how it was for the establishment, it was a threat.
It was a threat.
It's
the same over and over and over. It's repeating all that.
It's not just experience. There's something else going on in your analytical mind that keeps putting you knocking on the doorstep of innovation. Yes. Continuously, consistently for over 20 years.
Yeah, that's right. And then for some strange reason, not capitalizing on it. So it is something I obviously sit back. And one of the things that I am very sensitive to, and I thought maybe changing, is that because I am a person who creates the technology, right? So I've had the fortune of working in a very creative industry, which was financial services. It isn't now, but it was in the 90s. So things like swaps and CDOs and all that stuff, they were engineered, right, from maths, okay? And they served a really useful purpose in society, in my opinion, right? So, but I think what happens is, and it's the same for anybody maybe who's a physicist, or anybody who's in that kind of, I've got a feeling, well, this is how I feel, maybe I'm paranoid, but there's a different type of person and that's involved with actually really running the business and taking it to market and controlling the marketing funds, controlling it. You're a resource that's intellectual and innovative, but there's been an approach where those resources shouldn't actually get any higher. Right. So in the States, maybe it's been a bit different with Silicon Valley, but certainly everywhere else, I think there's like the government, for example, when I've spoken to them a few times, and then they gave us a document once that said, what you have to do is you don't come to us, you have to go to these big companies first, then they come to us. And I said, no, I'm not going to go to a big company because they will then obviously just consume what I've got, and take all the value. So I won't give of my intellect in that way. I'll just withdraw it and not get involved. But what I thought was happening in the blockchain space is that for the first time, technologists have got an opportunity to create a currency in their own intellect. So a currency of your own intellect. So you create software, you create an ecosystem. The whole idea with us is to have an ecosystem that helps people all gravitate to a mission to prevent identity theft and cybercrime. So here we've got an ecosystem with a cryptocurrency in it that's working with a protocol where the outcome is always getting people to behave in a certain way. So the opportunity for someone who's technical, innovative, with experience in economics, from that experience with financial services, suddenly all the ducks were lining up, or I thought they were, okay? But I have to say, with now where we are with the raise, maybe we should have done it 6 months ago, but you can only go so fast. with what's happening in the industry, I feel the same thing's happening, because now all of a sudden people are saying, oh, before you do an ICO, you have to have $1 million of marketing. So that means before you start a technology-based company, again, you need to hire the I mean, right now we've got over 20 people involved. We've got 4 accountants, 4 lawyers, 4 PR and comms people, and then we've got the people supporting them, and then we've got 3 developers,
But
2 part-time, 1 full-time.
Yeah.
So you see, it should be the opposite way round.
Correct.
If we're going to, you see, so obviously when we get the funds, we're hoping to switch it. So we've got all that intellect that's going into the product.
Google.
But this is only a year old or a year and a half old industry really around the tokenization, where you can already see how fast the rest of the world outside technology has tried to shift their business model to take exactly the same overheads from the old world to the new world.
I'm trying to remember the name of the technological principle. I think it might be Moore's principle, if I've got that correct. Every time innovation happens, it then exponentially speeds up the rate at which the next one will occur.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's what we're experiencing with blockchain. Like, you have a look at, again, I mean, you've walked the path. You've seen each individual, either financial or technological innovation. So Russian finance market pops. That's a few years. Then .com boom pops. That happened a little bit faster and faster. And now blockchain. Well, it's been a year of DApps, and look at us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. But I genuinely think that the global society that we have now is what's making a complete change possible.
Yeah.
With how we have an economy. I think all the stresses and strains that we've got, I think on a personal level, most people are fine, right? It's just that when we look at the news and what's happening, they go, oh, all this terrible stuff's happening. But I don't see it in my own day-to-day life, but they're really aware of it. So whether it's fake and it isn't as bad, I think it is as bad. It's just that now people are seeing things going on elsewhere more quickly, and they're feeling closer to it, where before it would just be in the newspaper. Okay, so our global connected world, technology itself. There's a guy that made a statement, a guy called Vinay Gupta. Okay, he's part of Ethereum from the beginning, and he said something in a interview. He was doing a presentation to the European Parliament, and he sat there and he said this. He said, "We've got to remember that the future is coming to us now."
Yes.
Right. I don't know whether he picked up that from somebody else, but that was kind of a profound statement to me.
It's wonderfully eloquent.
With software and technology, it is, and I've always said this, and people thought I was mad, but it is now, without being AI or some form of Terminator, thing.
Skynet.
The software itself is acting independently of us.
Yes.
And I'm talking from someone with 30 years in the business, from the point of view that I'm writing software and I'm constantly getting interrupted by changes elsewhere that I have to accommodate all the time, because my software is so integrated with hundreds and hundreds of other innovative pieces of software that are also evolving at the same time, right? So it's complete chaos and it's moving at a very high velocity. What he said there is absolutely right. I know, because a project that I had after I left JP Morgan Chase for a year was something called Sparkly Code. So if you go to sparklycode.com.
www.sparklycode.com.
Yeah, it's SPARQLY code.com. So I'd realized in JP Morgan Chase that we were totally out of control of the software, totally out of control, but I couldn't get anyone to understand. Okay. So I wrote this thing that I felt would allow non-technical people to query everything that was going on in the software, like a database, right? And I have no idea what the output would be of that. But once I got the system to work, I then put visualization tools on it. And even I was gobsmacked what I was seeing. I was seeing all of these behavioral patterns represented in graphs coming from these other people's tools that just show data. But the way I've constructed this data, I could see all kinds of things. I could see employees that work for us, that had worked for JP Morgan Chase, that were now working for somebody in China, but they were still pushing software into our software systems, but no longer working for us.
Huh.
I could see it. and I could see them, and I said, wow. So I tried to sell that back to JP Morgan Chase for a year. And
JP Morgan weren't
no.
aware that you left and that you were.
Yes, I'd said I'm leaving to do this, and I'm going to sell this back to you. So they supported me, and I went back. But they had a massive attack and took 500 million of budget and just gave it to some other people to do old-fashioned perimeter defense. So they still don't comprehend that the enemy's within.
Yeah.
Software is pulling the enemy in every day, right? They're giving the money to, with all due respect to security people involved in technology security often are not software developers. So they see the world as black boxes, and they're constantly trying to manage security from a black box. But security's got to come from inside the software, and that's where the blockchain comes in. The blockchain's,
So stop me if I can't go into this with you. However, how are these companies, the ex-employees, etc., accessing the JP Morgan Chase software? Is it through API coding? Is it through built-in backdoors? What's going on?
No. Okay, so the way that I'm not saying this is actually happening, but I'd be very surprised if it wasn't, because it's so obvious, right? Okay, so there are companies, a really great company like Sonatype, okay, and they specialize in giving companies technology that lets them check all of the third-party software components that they use before they pull them in to software that they've built, okay? But they do it in a very dumb way. They still don't know what the software is. They just look at, well, that component is signed there. They don't really say there's some logic in the software that if it behaves in a certain way will cause a certain situation to happen. They didn't do that. That's what I was trying to do. Yeah. Properly look at the statically and dynamically analyze the software. So the way it would work is that you just look at really common components like logging components, web query components, really common components that form the majority of other software components, right? So you look at those components and you get involved in the projects around those projects, right, outside the company, and you know something about JP Morgan Chase, like to check an IP address, or this is pretty bad. They'll probably sue me like mad now. Well, bring it on. Give me some publicity. Bad news is better than no news, right? But literally, you just understand a bit about what's happening in JP Morgan Chase environment-wise,
or any other bank,
or anybody else, of course. Yeah. And
just to be clear for the viewer, JP in this particular conversation is the example, but this is a global conversation about the financial system.
This is about all corporations, and I would say banks like JP Morgan Chase are the best at defending themselves, right? Because they have been using technology in an innovative way for a long time, but the second or third tiers probably just wouldn't be able to cope with this because they procure software from other people, they just install it, they don't even, and they take the package from someone else, but I bet they don't have true transitive comprehension of their software through all of the organizations that have been involved and people. They won't, right? But my software, SparkyCode, did do that. It gave full transitive visualization in and outside the organization to the code and its journey into your organization. So, as I say, someone just has to get involved in one of these very small projects, do something useful, they get to contribute something, and they put something in there that's aware of the environment. Eventually, it will get sucked into JP Morgan Chase, and eventually do something useful.
Yeah.
Like send out emails saying these are the trades they're making today or something.
Yeah.
Right. So, and this is it's a ginormous problem because in the old days, in the 80s and 90s, a lot of companies, there was no concept of the internet. So they did take their software quite seriously. They developed all their own software. Banks like Goldman Sachs, for example, they've got a lot of software they use, which is only their software. And technology people hate working there generally because they've got to learn their stuff, which doesn't give them a job anywhere else. Yeah. If you want a job, you want to know something that everybody uses, so you're in demand from, right? But Goldman Sachs and some banks, they use their own stuff on purpose. But by doing that, it's so expensive and difficult to keep taking advantage of all the new things that come on board, right? And your people get stuck and you're very person dependent. Those people get very expensive. You know, we've all heard the stories of the guy from the 1980s that developed the payment system, who's 82 and he's still paid to be involved, kind of thing, right? So you've just got to be someone that knows. And my technology showed all the components and the transitive relationship.
There's some diagrams.
If you went to sparklycode.com, you would see it. And I gave each pattern of behavior a little easy analogy to remember them. And I don't know what the right word is.
Yeah, like too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have a diagram, too many cooks in the kitchen, and then the idea is there would be a strategy for how to address that, whether it was a good or a bad thing. Okay. So is that too many people that have got the ability to influence your code, right? And then there's another one that I can't remember what it was called, but often you get a really good young guy, not being age prejudiced, but someone who's really good, okay, and he's come in and he's reporting to a manager, who's just a manager, and the guy comes in one day. I've actually had this said to me. So in one day, that young guy did all this, and I said, well, I appreciate what you're saying. The output seems good, but what was the damage done in the approach that he took? So there's actually a diagram on there that shows that someone picked one small component and used it, but when they did that, they brought in tons of rubbish that came in. So the output was incredibly productive. They were able to do something really quick, but the risk in the software was disproportionate to the value. Basically it was a shortcut, and maybe a more experienced software guy would have written the whole thing themselves, but they took a shortcut, which is right. Reuse is important anyway. So he reused it by doing that. There was like 100 extra components that were brought in with all their own dependencies. Okay, and you can see that kind of pattern on that website if you look. And hopefully the rhetoric tries to explain it. I mean, I was very passionate about that product because I generally believe that we have to look at the whole cyber crime, cyber security problem from a software point of view, not from externally black boxes. Okay.
That's absolutely fascinating, actually. Because every single cyber security thing I've interacted with, it's always talking about the external threat, not the internal safeguards.
Exactly, and they shouldn't. They should have their system, so you don't even have to worry about external threats. And that's where the blockchain comes in again. The blockchain is totally public, and if we go right back to the beginning of our conversation, I had said that even for me to change my instinct to be secretive, right, to being public, and public is safer than being secretive. So to have this stuff on a public blockchain, when you think about it, it's counterintuitive to what you think, because we kind of creatures, we like to keep things secret. But if everything is not secret, if it's not possible to stop people seeing, you need another way. And it's odd that becomes a public way of doing it.
And I decided that coming full circle there was the best place to leave this particular conversation. But what a journey. What a journey, especially Paul, the amount of industries he has been involved with, continuously being on the doorstep of these major financial and technological changes. It's absolutely crazy in my mind. So he's bringing a wealth of experience to their Zonifyd project. But really the most interesting thing for me, I have to say, was the sparklycode.com and the rogue data elements that were accessing parts of the JP Morgan system. And don't forget, that's not specifically about JP Morgan. If it's happening in one place, chances are it's happening in the other. But for me, it was just delightful to get to know the people behind the project. Hopefully next time we have a conversation, we'll get to hear a little bit more about Selena. So if you like this format and what we're doing here with the 360 Decentral show, make a few suggestions about who you'd like us to talk to and maybe send a tweet to that company and we'll see what we can get happening. I really want to try and grow this format and make it into a stand-alone show. But until next time, this has been 360 Decentral and I'll talk to you in the next one.